Hello everybody and welcome back to our live stream. We're going out live on this Friday afternoon. We're talking all the latest FPL news. And as always, going to hand it over to Mr. Ben to see how you're doing today.
Yeah, Mark, all good, my friend. We're approaching the international break. It has been a grueler of a week with the AFL Cup ties spread across Tuesday and Wednesday. So in terms of team news and availability and players being assessed, we can never be 100% sure because, like I say, players will not have fully trained at the time of press conferences. Some players and sides like Eddie Howe did post-match after the AC game in the Champions League simply didn't train at all before going down to Bramall Lane. And look how that turned out. So this will be an interesting weekend if we can come out of it smiling with a green arrow and 11 players starting and doing well. Then I suggest a big pat on the back.
Yes, and just for people as well, you know, people are filling the comments already saying flags, having fun with flags. Yes, there are a lot of flags. But today has just released my article for Analytics FC. I'll put it in the description as well about why some of the reasons why there's a lot of injuries at the start of the season. We did an analysis here with the Premier injuries data, and it shows that actually at the start of seasons there's a spike which many people wouldn't expect because you'd go, oh, players are fit, etc, etc. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit later, Ben, but obviously the key thing is the injury news, and the best place for injury news apart from this live stream where you can ask me and Ben is obviously the Premier Injuries website. And as you can see on screen, we've got a new feature of featuring the live stream on there so that you can know from the website to be up to date as possible. But also, if you don't have your question answered, or if you need to kind of do a bit more investigating, you can click any of the teams here, alphabetical order like we do in the stream, and you can find out the reasons, such as John Stones or maybe Rodrigo, why he is not playing this weekend. But we're going to go straight into the team news. Like some people have said, this could be a long one because there's quite a few things to discuss, but we're going to start off with Bournemouth, who I don't think too many people are invested in, Ben.
Yeah, not really. I mean, I suppose the headliner from a Cherries perspective would be the fitness of Dominic Solanke. Of course, the Bournemouth top scorer is the player that seems to attract the most interest at the moment. And he went off in the EFL Cup midweek, came on as a substitute. He was unable to finish the game, and that was because of an ankle injury, rolled that ankle. There was a lot of swelling in and around that. Now, again, the difficulty is he didn't train on Thursday, and then also he hadn't took part in the session when Areola spoke on Friday. So that's the one where we're having to make a bit of a judgment call. He was in a lot of pain. I suggest that if he does miss out, then we're maybe looking at Semenyo to lead that Bournemouth attack. But like I say, there's big question marks over him. And like I say, when we haven't got a definitive answer, we're just trying to interpret the information that we have to hand in that quick turnaround between midweek and obviously this game week. Then, you know, are we going to play the percentages and we'll assume that it's going to come around a little bit too soon.
Yes, indeed. So we're going to move from Bournemouth now on to Arsenal because I think that's where a lot of questions are already there. The team seems to almost have a little bit of an injury crisis at the moment now. You know, question marks over Rice, Partey's out. We've got potentially Saka injured for the first time in God knows how long. I can't remember how long his stretch of not being injured goes back for. You know, there's a few question marks in the squad. But Ben, can you put any kind of worries at ease here, or are you going to add a little bit more worries to potential Arsenal fans because you don't have Saka starting?
Correct, Jason. I want to go back just to a point near me, and it really bugs the injury crisis. Injuries are very much in vogue and the topic of a lot of conversation and particularly headlines at this stage of the season. And as you alluded to before in the data that we've done, we're actually down in terms of overall incidents over those initial game weeks, both for short-term and long-term injuries. And this crisis, let's see how many players play this weekend who've missed out over the last week. This part of it could just be that convenience of resting players in the EFL competition without any recourse from those governing bodies for playing maybe weakened teams. And also you forget that, Premier League squads are so big these days, and strength and depth, you're going to need to involve some of those fringe players as well. So, there's injuries when we're talking maybe, one or more games, and there's an injury where a player is maybe a 50-50 call and you decide to err on the side of caution, and you think, do I risk them in an AFL Cup, third round cup game, or do I make sure that they're 100% for the Premier League coming up? Got that off my chest. I'm off my soapbox.
I mean, what noun would you use to describe Arsenal's situation then? Or is it not anything negative at all? It's just a few injuries.
It's a few injuries. Like I say, let's see what happens this weekend. Crisis, you look at Sheffield United, who have on occasions have had 9, 10, 11 players unavailable, by nowhere near the amount of depth and budget that the likes of Arsenal have. So these big teams, I've even heard them talking about Manchester City as having an injury crisis with 5 or 6 players on the sidelines. Manchester City could field 23, 24 players that would probably walk into most Premier League teams. So, don't give us that crap. For me, it's just this media strapline used to stoke up a little bit of, it's great for me, and people are talking about injuries and they're raising the profile and it's being flagged. But FIFA Pro have been talking about exposure and load and reducing it. I put a couple of quotes out that went back to a BBC article that I think I'd done in 2018 when Pep was saying it, 2019 with Jurgen Klopp. And talking even with people in the game, players want to play. If you ask the players, how many games do they want to play? And the majority will say, yeah. And, it also comes down to finance. If you're going to reduce, that load, does that hit them in the pocket? And then, I know you touched upon the commercial aspect for your Analytics FC article, but commercially, by putting breaks into the season, does that then offer the opportunities for clubs to take players away and play meaningless friendlies in some of the far-flung corners of the earth? So there's no simple answer to this. Would be the long and the short of it, but I'm certainly not seeing a crisis. If we're talking double figures and if we're talking about squads that are becoming at risk of, not being able to field an experienced starting 11, and maybe you're calling upon, youth and development players to fill in those spaces, then look, yes. Then maybe you've got a right to say that potentially, there's a team in dire need because of the number of absences that they have. But what a load of bollocks. Arsenal aren't in crisis. Look, you have Saka injured. Then, you play a front three, as I have here, with Havertz and Ketia and Jesus. And that's including whether Trossard's out, Martinelli out. It's hardly, it doesn't massively weaken the team. You've got a couple of injuries, but certainly nothing at this moment that would suggest that they're really sort of severe and long term. I'm babbling. I'll cut to the chase and get to the interesting points and who I think will potentially be in and be out. The two biggest concerns for me would be Trossard and Martinelli. That's just the very nature of hamstring injuries in themselves. We heard from Mikel Arteta, was one of the first managers that we heard from on Friday morning, and therefore his session wasn't planned until around about 60 minutes after that chat. So again, he was able just to sort of straight back any comments, with regards to updates on his players. They haven't trained up to this point. We need to see. And then, of course, even if players do train, quite often they will want to make sure that there isn't any kind of overnight reaction to those injuries. Next, earlier in the week, Mikel Arteta was fairly confident that Declan Rice could recover from that lower back problem. Bukayo Saka was a little bit more of a doubt. And again, Arteta said that it is a possibility that he could miss the Bournemouth game. Now, when asked again, would he pick this team with one eye maybe on those two upcoming games in the Champions League and then Manchester City in week 8? Is that right? I think I have. Then, he said, no, we pick the games for here and now. But of course, there is a little bit of that in it as well. And particularly with those guys with those hamstring injuries, those would be the worries given the high injury and high recurrence rates.
There was a couple of question marks over a few other players in the squad as well. William Saliba, potential knock. What's the latest on that, Ben?
Yeah, minor issues for Fabio Vieira and also William Saliba. Of course, they both missed out in the cup, but it's hard to read a lot, in terms of those starting 11s and those squads in the cup games, because I'm not saying they're meaningless, but particularly for those teams who are involved in European competition and the Champions League, it doesn't feature high in their list of priorities for competitions to win. So, look, as you can see from this predicted lineup, the one player that I would sort of toy with at this stage would be the Saka. Like you say, he's been up until now a very robust player. Does not miss many minutes at all. So he may be one that this could change slightly ahead of the FPL deadline.
And so me using the term injury crisis, is that red flagged for the rest of the season? Is it ruled out now?
I'll let you off. It's your verbal warning. It's a yellow card, Jay, anymore. And you're out of here.
So let's continue over to Aston Villa. What is the latest for the Villains in quite a tough fixture against Brighton?
Yeah, made a lot of changes through the week there. I'm just actually looking at to see how many. It was 5 from Unai Emery. So they did go fairly strong against Everton. Unfortunately for the Villains, they fell. The Toffees made it back-to-back wins. Sean Dyche, what a difference a week makes. And on top of that, they lost Leon Bailey to what looked to be another hamstring problem. Now, thankfully, if you're a supporter of Leon Bailey, that is, it doesn't look to be too serious, but certainly out of this weekend, and I doubt he'll return before the international break. Elsewhere within the team, I mean, like I say, Unai Emery could have went, brought in a few other players in to rest, particularly the likes of Konza and what have you, but he didn't. So yeah, I'm seeing, they're doing quite well in the league, Aston Villa, so I don't see too many changes. People talking up there maybe as a John Duran up front, but look, Ollie Watkins, he's either on the brink or he has just signed a new contract. He's a firm favourite of Unai Emery, so for me, there is no way that the striker is maybe sharing minutes with anybody else. He is the main man in that Villa attack for me.
I mean, we were about to get on to Brighton injury news anyway, but just absolutely fascinating stats between the two managers here. De Zerbi, 38 games in charge, and Emery, 31 games in charge. The better win ratio comes from Unai Emery, 61% in his matches under Villa in the Premier League, but De Zerbi still not to be sniffed at, 50%. These are two really, really good teams at the moment. Do you see the game kind of going one way or the other, or is this one really hard to predict?
I mean, it is a big call. I do like the Seagulls, arguably one of the best run clubs, both on and off the pitch in the country. I did fear for them after the summer, following the two big money departures of Alexi McAllister and Moses Caicedo, and players just seem to come in to those positions and they pick up where they left off. them themselves are carrying a one or two sort of key injuries as well. On top of that, Pascal Gross being one of those, he's been pivotal. And we've also seen a niggling hamstring problem for Solly Marsh in recent times. But, Brighton keep on going out there and getting 3 points. That win at Old Trafford against Manchester United, albeit against the Manchester United side in poor form. But you still have to go to the Theatre of Dreams, and do your business. And look, I'm really impressed with Brighton and De Zerbi. I do like Unai Emery, but I think the Seagulls could just edge this one.
Now we're moving back to the questions here. Maris has said, how long is Bailey likely to be out for? And could we see Cash as a right winger or right midfielder?
I'm expecting Leon Bailey probably to return after the international break. That will sort of give us in the region of around about sort of 3 weeks. But again, you cannot really give any kind of definitive timeframes in and around these types of injuries, just given the fact that, they're such tricky ones to handle. But, as it currently stands, without any kind of reaction or setback, we're looking at around about that sort of 21-day to 28-day period. Like I say, that international break provides a really good opportunity for him to recover. With regards to Matty Cash, well, yeah, possibly, because we've seen Diego Carlos return to the Villa bench midweek. Wasn't handed any minutes. And we have seen from Unai Emery previously is to go with 3 centre-backs and push Cash and Digne a little bit higher up the pitch. Now, had Diego Carlos got minutes in the AFL Cup, then I might have been slightly more inclined to go with that sort of 3-5-2, 5-3-2 in possession. But because he didn't, and he's being handled, with a little bit of care, I think maybe next week that could be potentially that formational change. But for this one, we'll go with that 4-2-3-1, as I say, or maybe even a 4-4-2.
The Disabled Team says, hello, everyone. Good evening to you as well, the Disabled Team. Ricardo wants to bring us quickly back to Bournemouth. He said, did Sinisterra miss the EFL game because of injury?
Sinisterra? No, he didn't. Off the top of my head, cup tied.
Ah, there you go.
So he had obviously played in those early rounds before arriving on loan with Leeds.
There you go. Then Kerry has asked, is Digne nailed on the left? We kind of get this one every week with the kind of Moreno, is he, isn't he situation.
Moreno is still working his way back. We know he had surgery on his hamstring. That's a slow burner. And given the fact that Digne has been in such great form since the beginning of the season, he's locked in that place, and that makes it an easy decision for Unai Emery. And, Moreno can just take his little bit of time then and make sure that he is back up to speed. And when he does return finally, he not only can come back in, but he can stay back in.
Now, moving from the villains to the bees, Brentford, what is the latest there? They'll be looking to bounce back after a couple of not great results.
Yeah, we're going back to a 4-3-3. The result against Arsenal you can maybe forgive against a quality team, but the defeat at home to Everton, that one will hurt. There was a little bit of disruption to that starting lineup just prior to kick-off against Everton. That was Kevin Shorter. He was taken away by the medical department after pulling up with an adductor problem. He's since had surgery on that, so we're looking at a couple of months on the sideline. So we have Lewis Potter coming in on that left-hand side. Elsewhere, it pretty much picks itself. There's maybe only one or possibly even 2 changes that you would really sort of make in and around this squad. Ben Mee being out of contention. It looks like Pinnock and Collins are going to be those go-to, but Jorgensen or Zankin was one of those who did play in the AFL.
There you go. Marius says, Mbermo era comes to an end. He's not really phrased that as a question, but I guess I can throw that as a question to you. Would you be taking him out for your team, Ben?
Well, he's not in my team. For a start, I think the big draw was he's an out of position midfielder who inherently is going to be playing in that Brentford front line, whether that's in a 4-3-3 or a 3-5-2. And for that reason, I think he probably still deserves that maybe bit of a reprieve and have a little bit of confidence. Look, there's a bit of a blip here with Brentford. You can't deny that. That's 3 defeats on the spin, but it's not like they haven't been terrible. They were actually very good at St James's Park. And yes, it was, you could argue the Callum Wilson goal disallowed was controversial, but then again, so was the penalty that we were awarded. And on another day, like I say, they could have easily left with a share of the spoils. So I would hold for now, and see how it goes, and then I'd reevaluate my team, during that international break and see where we are.
Yeah, the annoying thing with Mbeumo's is kind of like his blanks are not unexpected because, he only had 0.16 XG against Everton. He had 0.08 against Newcastle. And the games that he is kind of blanking, it's like really almost he's not getting any good service. So on a positive, I guess, in a sense, is when he's getting the chances, he's putting them away. But on the negative, it seems like Brentford have been a little bit thwarted in the attack in the last couple of games. But there's good games ahead. Nottingham Forest are up next. Obviously, it's away, and they do make their ground quite tough to play at. But also, it's not like they don't concede goals at home. They just make it very tough for teams to get a result. Man United, they're really bad at the moment, so you wouldn't bet against, Brentford there. Burnley after that, then Chelsea. There's still 4 good games there against, opposition that are leaking goals and aren't playing great at the moment. So I'd give him a bit of an opportunity as well. Diego says, cheers from Mexico, lads. For my FPL draft, do you think Cuckoo, I don't know who Cuckoo is
Cucurella? No, Cucurella? Possibly?
Maybe is good for the next 2 game weeks. I don't know.
If he's questioning the Cucurella, then it's potentially coming in as a right back, deputising for the suspended Mayo Gusto.
Oh, okay.
The only competition that could possibly disrupt that would be the return of Reece James. Certainly not this week. Maybe game week 8, but of course there is a possible FA ban hanging over his head, which means, like I say, Cucurella could see out this little block of games and again maybe reevaluate over the break.
So GV has cleared that up. Cucurella, yes, and you've answered that nicely and succinctly, Ben. We're going to move on to Brighton now, and as we said, they're a tough game for them, but what is the latest injury news?
Yeah, at least one change to this lineup. Adam Lallana, he picked up another muscle injury, coming on as a substitute midweek. So he is out of contention. Now, potentially that does open the door for maybe Ansu Fati to make his full debut in the Premier League. The Barcelona loanee has had a couple of decent appearances in the AFL and also from the bench. So maybe it's an opportunity for Roberto De Zerbi to throw him in there. Some good news with regards to Pascal Gross. I mentioned him before. There was a suggestion that he was going to be out until after the break, but now he's responded to treatment much better than initially hoped. And while this weekend comes too soon, then maybe the Europa League is an option for Pascal Gross. But the Brighton lineup has been notoriously difficult to predict in recent weeks. We're going back to the Graham Potter days where we're seeing 4, 5 and 6 changes, and also to key players as well. We've seen the likes of Solly Marsh drop out, Espartini, and Evan Ferguson's another one. Adam Webster's now just returned because we've seen Van Heck preferred. So they've been a difficult team. Mike Toma, I think, was benched last week as well. So there will definitely be at least one change to this Seagulls starting 11.
It is a hard one, but also they're such a good team at the moment. You want their assets in, but it's kind of becoming almost that rotational roundabout that you want to avoid. Burnley have a double game week here. As always, we say there's not too much interest in them, but I think a couple of assets will be grabbing the attention. Bayer is one of them, or Bayer, I'm not sure how you pronounce his name, but with the Clarets, they do have a double game week and maybe a bit more attention on them than usual.
Yeah, people flock to double game weeks, don't they? Like the moss to the flame. And you almost are blindsided by the fact that these teams have 2 fixtures, but ultimately they're pretty crap in terms of an FPL standpoint. So unless you haven't got fires to put out elsewhere, and maybe you have a free transfer hanging around, I mean, I really wouldn't necessarily be dipping into the Clarets market too heavily. Of course, it came off the back of an excellent AFL result midweek. Excellent in terms of confidence and morale boosting. It was 4-0, but that first game against Newcastle, it's a different kettle of fish. It's a different class of opponent, and Vincent Kompany, he's not getting too carried away with that. Always plays his cards very close to his chest in terms of potential lineups and players missing. So again, we are sometimes picking players in the dark at this. We do know that Manuel Benson picked up an ankle injury in the Cup. He's out until after the break. Nathan Redmond making good progress after the break, so we're not seeing any threat from them. And Lyle Foster, he would miss the first game against Newcastle, but potentially the striker could return for the game against Luton Town.
Yes, and you brought up a very good point there, which I think a lot of people, you just come off your athletic Q&A, and loads of people I saw were putting questions to you about, bringing in Morris or taking a hit to bring in Burnley or Luton assets. And it just seems a little bit of madness because, first of all, it's one double game week. But second of all, it's not like you're bringing in, I don't know, Bukayo Saka, who's having a double game week. You go, okay, maybe fair enough, a hit for him because you'd keep him long term. This is literally just one double game week of 2 teams that are probably going to go down. They're pretty bad. And so it just seems way too much interest, and long-term thinking is not in that factoring at the moment. So let's continue over to Chelsea. I guess another team that are very hard to work out. Another team that aren't performing very well. So Ben, what's the latest there?
Yeah, we alluded to the fact that Cucurella did deputise on that right-hand side. So the chances are he's going to probably be deployed there by Mauricio Pochettino. There was a lot of people questioning the decision for me to omit Ben Chilwell from the starting 11 last week. I think I had a couple of comments on my timeline saying there's absolutely no chance that will happen. You don't know what you're talking about. I rest my case. I've got to take these small wins because I get so many others wrong. So I'll take that one. And of course, he's picked up that hamstring problem. Doesn't look great. No official time frame, but I'm led to believe that we could be looking at least 4 to 6 weeks, maybe even beyond for Ben Chilwell. It's the same hamstring injury that he suffered last year. That's the right hamstring, so not great for him. We know Nicholas Jackson, he's suspended. I have Raheem Sterling leading the attack. That's because Armando Broja isn't quite ready to start yet. We're probably looking at maybe 20 to 30 minute cameos for him. Cole Palmer impressed Mauricio Pochettino. So, with Sterling going up, then potentially we have Cole Palmer coming in on that right-hand side. And another one that I did look at, Levi Cole, and I was thinking, really he's a player that you want to leave out on that left-hand side. But again, Mauricio Pochettino said he's been blown away by his performances, and he's very happy for him to stay there. So it doesn't look like there's going to be too much change certainly in the near future with regards to Colwell moving out and vacating that left-back spot.
And I guess that's one positive about the Chelsea situation, is that is almost the template for the team emerging, which we didn't have last season. We weren't sure at the start of this season, but they're just not clicking very well at the moment. And, I think a lot of people are still invested in some of their assets, the likes of Chilwell, Gusto, even Sterling. And it just seems at the moment the best kind of tactic is to get them out. Now, Crystal Palace is one that you've talked about as being one of the differentials of this game week. They're playing Manchester United away at Old Trafford, but you're kind of going against the data or the prediction to you like them to give a bit of an upset at least.
Well, certainly to give them a good game, and that's more to do with the fact. And I don't really think Palace are great by any stretch of the imagination. And of course, the big blow for them is the loss of their leading goal scorer, Odsonne Edouard. Unfortunately, that's a hamstring problem for him, and we see Mateta come in. It doesn't offer the same level of potency as Edouard, but look, I think Manchester United. Well, let's forget about that EFL Cup result midweek 3-0. This will be a completely different game, and I expect it to be a lot closer. No great change in terms of players recovering from the treatment room. Dean Henderson, unfortunately, won't have the opportunity to line up against his former employers. That's a thigh problem that's been hampering him since the beginning of the year. Looks to have suffered a re-injury with that. Doesn't look great. Needs a second scan to determine how serious that is. However, that said, Sam Johnson looks to have that number 1 jersey anyway locked down, certainly in the league.
Now, we do have a question from Kerry. She's kind of bringing it back to the Chilwell discussions. She said, who do you think is a good replacement for Chilwell? Initially off the bat, I like Kieran Trippier. I think he's great. We saw last weekend a treble up of assists. A lot of people kind of were hoping that Reece James or Chilwell were going to get clean sheets and also attacking output. But I think Trippier's the real deal when it comes to that. Newcastle, they've had a slow start to the season, but I can see them getting those clean sheets under their belt now, playing quite well. But always Trippier is a threat because he has the set pieces as well, doesn't he, Ben?
Yeah, and who doesn't love an attacking fullback with a lot of offensive threat, high ceiling, and yeah, it's hard to look past Kieran Trippier, another player that offers a similar type of promise. Stupinian. Again, not so much from his dead ball threats, but certainly as an attacking fullback who likes to wander forward. But we have seen minutes being rationed in recent times with Tariq Lamptey. So yeah, look, I'd probably lean towards Kieran Trippier as well. Not somebody I would go for because I don't like to put the kiss of death on those Newcastle players. Those, is it three clean sheets now on the bounce, and so it's good. It's taking us back to our roots. That what we're good at. That foundational basis to allowing those higher up the pitch to go out and do a job, and confidence is going to be skyrocketing after that result at Sheffield United. I think this weekend is going to be a tough game because there'll be a lot of eyes on us. And then, of course, we're carrying those injuries and then also the Champions League again. So, look, I will take any result that comes our way this week, even a 1-0.
Everton up next. As we said when we were discussing Brentford, they were the shock of last weekend. But looking at their underlying data, they have improved a lot under Sean Dyche. They've got another great fixture this game week against Luton to maybe push on. But I find it interesting, Beto is starting up top. Even though Calvert-Lewin came on, he scored. Bit of a boost of confidence. Exactly what he needs, exactly what Everton needs. But he's not starting up. I mean, what is the latest injury news?
Very good overall for the Toffees. And yes, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, it's actually 2-2 for Calvert-Lewin. It was a really composed finish against Aston Villa and also scored against Brentford. Just seeing how the strike has been managed under Sean Dyche. He hasn't thrown him in. Even when he's been out on the training pitches and playing in behind closed doors games, he's took his time and he's hoping that cautious approach to reintegration will protect him in the long term. And I just think the prospect of starting back-to-back games is maybe a little bit too much. There will be opportunities, I'm sure, for Sean Dyche to go back to his much lauded and much loved 4-4-2 with Beto and Calvert-Lewin. But for this week, probably not, in my opinion. I'm thinking maybe Sean Dyche will look to protect him. If he can come off the bench and score again, then great guns, and we'll see a start in week 8, I'm sure.
Marius has said, do you think Pickford will get the first clean sheet of the season for himself?
Look, there's a great opportunity for Everton to make it 3 consecutive wins. Put a bit of daylight between those at the bottom and Everton, and I think they could, if results went their way, potentially move up to 12th, and that would be a great sort of 7 days for the Toffees. What a difference a week makes, as the old saying goes. So I think there's every chance defensively. Tarkowski and Branthwaite looking pretty solid. Out on the flanks, I don't think Sean Dyche is overly confident with Nathan Patterson and Ashley Young. They're not ideal, the age and fullback, but I think he starts with concerns over the fitness of Michaelenko. I don't think he'll take too many chances. So again, it could be tight, it could be narrow. Maybe a 1, possibly a 2-0, but yeah, a clean sheet for Pickford, as much as it would pain me to say that.
Fulham up next. Again, I think a team that a lot of people have lost a lot of interest in. They're just not what they once were. But what is the latest for the Cottagers?
Don't see too many changes. I have Carlos Vinicius starting in the Fulham attack. That's based on 2 goals in 2 games. And also Raul Jimenez was absent from the matchday squad at midweek. Of course, he may just have been rested. They were certainly not aware of any issues injury-wise. I'm also throwing Alex Iwobi in there for his first possible Premier League start. And again, that comes off the back of his goal in his first start in the EFL Cup.
That one actually went under my radar. I forgot that Alex Iwobi went to Fulham. Interesting. So continuing over from Fulham to Liverpool. Again, this one, sometimes a little bit difficult to predict this team. But you have gone with this 11. And you've got Trent back in the 11 as well, which will be a boost to a lot of FPL players. Can you talk us through this news, Ben?
Yeah, returned to the training pitches fully on Thursday. So he's had more or less 2 days with the group. Ideally, would I be throwing him in there? Possibly not, but Joe Gomez has also been carrying a little bit of a knock. That kept him out of the game midweek. So there are question marks over him, although Jurgen Klopp had previously said that he did expect him to be available. I also have Joel Matip in there as well, ahead of Ibrahima Konate. Manage his own ongoing muscular problems. The only sort of other discussion points are maybe around those 2 places in attack alongside Mo Salah, with Diego Jota and Cody Gakpo vying with Diaz and Nunes. I think Nunes is probably the one who looks more nailed, as it were, and maybe Luis Diaz is the riskier punt, but I'll go with that. And I'm sticking with Curtis Jones as well, who, of course, captained the side midweek.
There you go. So moving from Liverpool to Luton, real golf in class there. What is the quick latest news on them?
Big injury blow. Sambi Lokonga went off last week. He arrived at the club as their marquee loan signing, as it were. Unfortunately, that's a hamstring injury. We're looking at a couple of months. He's actually returned to his parent club to receive treatment. And certainly in terms of a start, Ross Barkley, there won't be any old boys reunion. He's recovering from his own hamstring problem. So any minutes are likely to come from the bench if he does indeed make the matchday squad.
Yeah, 2 big blows there for Luton, although obviously the Barclay one is more that he's working his way up to fitness. Now on to Manchester City. We kind of alluded to, or you did at the start with your impassioned discussion about injury crises. They do have some injury problems. Is that an all right word to use, Ben? I don't want to trigger you or anything.
They have injuries, Jason.
They have injuries. They have injuries.
Teams can have injuries without it being a crisis and without everybody going into meltdown. There are allowed injuries. Football is a contact sport.
Yeah.
Pep has to consider certain positions within his squad, because there are a couple who maybe not 100%.
So who are these individuals that we must be aware of?
Right, well, I've went against Nathan Ake again. And again, this goes back to a hamstring issue that he came into the season with, and also one eye on the Champions League. I think you prefer maybe Ake to be a part of that starting 11 in Europe. And of course, he did play, I'm sure he played a part. I hope I haven't got that wrong. In the EFL Cup, Man City made 8 changes off the top of my head, and I'm sure Ake was one of those that did start. So a little bit rotation that backline just to protect him. Or that discussion point could be, he has talked about Calvin Phillips, started in the EFL Cup, talked about his qualities, and Pep said, by his own admission, he maybe hasn't got the best out of Calvin Phillips since his arrival from Leeds, and that's his fault. So maybe he might be rotated with Kovacic, again coming back off an injury, a back problem, with Rodri suspended for 3 games. The other one that I do as well, and I'm a little bit reluctant to name this one because I've got Alvarez in my starting 11, but Alvarez has played a lot of minutes in recent times now. We could actually see Jack Grealish maybe coming on the left and Phil Foden in, and that 10 role as a possibility. So I'm going to have a think about this with the City lineup as well, and possibly Alvarez might make way, like I say, just given the fact that he's had such a high load in recent times. He led the attack at St James's Park on Wednesday night in the absence of Haaland. So, like I say, just a young player, you have to be a little bit careful with that, and the team at Man City are really good at managing those players.
Yes, indeed. So let's move from the blue side of Manchester to the red side. We're talking about Manchester United, who still have a lot of issues, so much so that you put Amrabat as the left back.
Yeah, so Luke Shaw, check out. Tyrell Malacia, check out. Diego Jalot has switched flanks to the left, but because Wan-Bissaka is injured, out, check. He stays on the right. Amrabat deputised in the EFL Cup. Now, by his own admission, Amrabat is not 100%, still working his way back up to fitness, but what better opportunity to get that fitness than being in the first team, and told Erik ten Hag, look, I am there, available and ready to play wherever you need me. And the Moroccan will probably be needed on that left-hand side. So we have him in. I also have a rare start for Harry Maguire. And that's because this ongoing problematic foot issue that's hampering Lisandro Martinez has flared up again. We're looking at an extended period, maybe towards sort of late October, maybe around 4 to 6 weeks with that. So, we've seen a little bit of a reshuffle of that back four elsewhere on the pitch. Again, I'm not 100% locked in with this. Garnacho on the left, and which pushed Rashford on the right, which isn't ideal. And we have seen a slight change in formation previously with a 2 up top where Rashford and Highland didn't quite work out. We've also seen Bruno go out on the right-hand side as well in recent times. So maybe Pellistri could come in on the right, Rashford back to the left. Like I say, I'm going to have a little bit of a think on this one as well. But yeah, it's a 8-9 players look to be locked in. It's those 1 or 2 where, Erik ten Hag depends on what's been happening on the training pitches and how he wants to sort of freshen his team.
Now, I'm tempting fate here, but 10 players out on the Premier Injuries website. You've got Amrabat as a left back. You're kind of shoehorning in all these players. Is it getting close to the C word there?
There's a crisis at left back.
I got him to say at least...
There's problems in the fullback positions.
Okay,
I'll give them that with like I say, with 3 fullbacks out of contention, or even in the back line as well, with Martinez, Varane just coming back. Maguire hasn't been 100% either in recent times. So, look, there are considerations in defence for Erik ten Hag.
Thesaurus is coming out to avoid saying that one word. We do have a couple of questions about Manchester United. Now, obviously, the incidents with Anthony that we can't really discuss, but it seems like maybe things have changed and he might return this weekend. I'm not sure if that is correct, Ben.
He has been cleared for a return to the club to resume training. And that resumption of training is going to be on Saturday. So in terms of being in contention for game week 7, you wouldn't have thought so. I don't think Eric Ten Hag is that desperate, but possibly for European football next week. He said that the player has been keeping him fit. So this ongoing investigation, while that continues, he will sort of remain available for selection and open to discuss the case as they see fit. So yeah, a return to that matchday squad is not far away.
And then what is the latest news on Mason Mount, Ben?
Mason Mount, his withdrawal midweek after 45 minutes half time. That was planned. So again, there was no injury there. We know he's coming off the back of his own hamstring problems. It feels like I'm just talking about hamstring problems throughout this stream. So yeah, look, he is one that we may look Mount in Bruno's position with Bruno on the right, then Rashford on the left. It all really comes down to, it's all well and good playing in a domestic cup competition where teams are making lots of changes. The intensity isn't necessarily there. It's a different kettle of fish in the Premier League. And I'm just wondering whether Mason Mount is quite ready to be thrown in there from the beginning, or is it better to be introduced from the bench a little bit later on in the game when that physicality and has reduced a little bit to play himself back in to Premier League football at a more, I'm not going to say a sedate pace, but like I say, not with the same cut and thrust of maybe those opening exchanges.
Now we move on to the best United in the Premier League, Newcastle. What is the latest there?
Newcastle team news is a little bit of a nightmare. We always hear from Eddie Howe around 10 o'clock on a Friday morning. So that's before his final session. There were several players flagged as doubt after midweek, and also several players who missed out of that AFL Cup tie win over Manchester City, as I alluded to before. There were 10 changes. Nick Pope, the goalkeeper, was the only player to remain from that win at Bramall Lane, and that was because Martin Dubravka was indeed out with a virus. So as you can see from this, I haven't made too many changes at all. Harvey Barnes is a player that we do know will miss out. He will be lucky to play again this year. That's a foot problem, toe. We're looking at least 3 months on the sidelines with that. So that would, Anthony Gordon, man of the match performance at Sheffield United. So he would come straight back in. Callum Wilson was training away from the main group today. Now, that's nothing new with regards to Wilson and managing his load. It is a slight concern, though. On the flip side to that is also, if you wanted to err on the side of caution, then you would think Alexander Isak would just lead that Newcastle attack. But indeed himself picked up a calf issue, a little bit of tightness in there from midweek. So these muscle problems are the worry, because a little bit of tightness, a little bit of soreness, that can quickly, turn into something a little bit more sinister and severe if pushed at the wrong moment and risked unnecessarily. And Eddie Howe really can't afford to do that. Like I say, with the games coming thick and fast, we have PSG next week as well. So I am pondering on this one, Jason. Everybody else, I think the likes of Botman, knee should be okay. Dan Burn, illness, fine. The Wilson one is me 70-30 call at this moment. Bruno, ankle problem. I see him as being absolutely fine. But again, we do have a little bit more depth to our team. So that does give Eddie Howe a little bit of flexibility around bringing players in. Tonali could start in there, of course. Joe Linton was back midweek and impressed, and it was his assist for the goal. So yeah, I'm going to have a think about this and try to, have a look at it with some fresh eyes in maybe an hour or so and see what I think then.
So I guess, obviously check out Ben's Twitter. He might offer an update on his thoughts and feelings on that. But as always, this is a living document as well on the FF Hub. You do chop and change it because news is ever changing. That's why we always say always leave your transfers to the last minute as well. You could be caught out, especially on a game week like this where there's so many red flags. Nottingham Forest up next. What is the latest there?
Yeah, we have Tavares, who is definitely out of the game. Not as serious as first thought. That's another Arsenal loanee. Whether he returns before the break remains to be seen. Now, Steve Cooper tried to sort of nullify Manchester City last week and pack that midfield and defence. It made it really hard for them to break down. I see a more expansive setup from Forest, whether they go with a 4 or maybe even a 3-4-3. Ilanga is a player who could come in. We've seen Worrell and McKenna, I think, drop out last week with Niakite dropping into that back line. So again, this Forest team is a little bit difficult to try and pin down. We've seen a first start for Dominguez last week. And to be honest, I'll hold my hands up. I've got no idea who he is, where he really came from, if he's any good. But obviously Steve Cooper and those at the club done their due diligence. So, must be a decent turn. Callum Hudson-Odoi was dropped to the bench as well after his performance against Burnley. I have him straight back in that starting 11. Gonzalo Montiel, the Argentine, is another possibility on the right-hand side, although he hasn't filled really supporters with any confidence with his performances so far. There will be a little bit of a period of time before he settles in and that adaptation. So that's why I've went with Elra on the right, although he offers a lot more going forward than he does defensively.
So obviously there's a bit of upset in the comments that I'm not starting for Nottingham Forest, but I can't be here, there and everywhere. I am on the stream today. So yeah, that's where I'm putting my shift in for the 90 minutes. And also I guess a shout out to Alex Stewart, who is, the commissioner at Analytics FC. His favourite player, Ibrahim Sangare, is playing as well. And I like him as well. So we'll move from Newcastle onto Sheffield United. Again, probably not much interest apart from the right centre-back, number 15, Ben. What's his name again?
Yeah, the right centre-back.
Yes, number 15.
Amehodzic. Hold on, I think I broke up there a little bit. It's Amehodzic. Oh. I'm a Hodic. Oh, bollocks. I had this one before and I've done all right with it. Yeah, but now I'm a Hodic. I'm a Horvich.
Marius has said next, but I don't know if we should say next with such a great performance there. Is there any news that people need to be aware of with the Blades?
McBurney back. I definitely have him starting for the Blades. Let's rate this result against Newcastle off as an anomaly. Games prior to that had been fairly tight. All the ones that were lost were by a single goal. So I don't expect wholesale changes. Slight concerns over Gus Hamer managing an ongoing problem. So he is one to have a slight question mark over. And I'm sure somebody like maybe Ollie Norwood would be the player to come in.
So going from Sheffield United to Tottenham, and what's the latest with the Lily Whites?
All the talk, all the questions have been about the fitness of James Maddison. He has trained normally. I think Ange Postecoglou said that he completed everything that we needed him to complete. We'll just see how he recovers. And we spoke about any kind of reactions overnight. But for all intents and purposes, at this moment, he and Hyman Singh look to be absolutely fine. So no issues there. A big blow, losing Brendan Johnson last week on his full debut since arriving from Nottingham Forest. Hamstring problem. Not as serious as they could be. So that maybe opens up an opportunity either for Manor Solomon or even Richarlison to come in. Now, I've went with Solomon for this one. Elsewhere within the team, again, will look pretty much locked down.
And so you're certain that Maddison will play this weekend then?
As certain as I can be. I mean, given his form, given his importance, given the fact that Tottenham, are face Liverpool, so it's a big game. He's a big time player. In terms of his fitness and the injury, like I say, he's completed the sessions. He's been working well without restriction. So unless there's some kind of overnight problem, then I've got James Maddison in that starting 11.
Now, just before we move on to the next team news, can I remind people, please do hit that like button, share the video as well, and hit the subscribe button as well, because lots of you tune in, but not everybody subscribes, and it helps us out because then we can make more great content for you. But we're getting into the last couple of teams now. West Ham up next, the Hammers. It's a good game week for them, I feel. A great game, a lot of interest in their assets, but is there any kind of worries that people should be aware of as well?
Generally, a fit and healthy squad for the Hammers. Aaron Cresswell hamstring is the only major concerns. David Moyes made 10 changes in the cup. Thomas Souček was the only survivor from game week 6. But we've seen Souček play back-to-back games midweek without any problem. He's a very fit lad in terms of his levels, distance covered, his intensity. He's certainly up there with the fittest of those Hammers players within the Hammers squad. So him starting again wouldn't be too much of a concern. Like I say, the fact that Moyes made 10 changes again is a big indication that we'll probably revert to the team that more or less played in game week 6.
So that's good news for people who might be looking at James Ward-Prowse. I think he's been a revelation. He's such a good player. Bowen, he's catching a lot of attention as well for this great game in game week 7. And then the final team, again, one that not a lot of people are interested in, Wolves. But I guess the big news for them is obviously goalkeeper Sarr has signed a new contract. That's a big boost for them in terms of, I guess, longevity. But what is the short-term injury news?
Yeah, again, looking at a pretty fit and healthy squad, just a couple of players. New signing Bellegarde, sent off, dismissed for coming together, a tangling of legs, and he lashed out. So unfortunately, that's a 3-game ban for him. And given the nature of this fixture, I'm rewarding, and I'm taking a little bit of a punch at Bertrand Traore. Impressed Gary O'Neill in the AFL Cup. Like I say, I just think maybe he deserves a little bit of a chance. Worked well in training, shore up that midfield, create the numbers and make them hard to break down. So that's why we went. Hee-chan was the only player again who played in the AFL Cup from game week 6. Ongoing hamstring problems, but came off nice and early to be protected. So that's why I have Hee-chan Wang starting again for Wolves.
There you go. So that is all the injury news for game week 7 wrapped up there. We hope that we've answered your questions as good as possible. But we're going to wish you the best of luck. Game week 7 just around the corner. Double game week, but not too exciting if I'm honest. It is only Burnley and Luton. But for now, we're going to wish you the best of luck, the best of health,